Reagan is, it's about Ronald Reagan. It's a biopic about his life, and it takes place on the backdrop of the Cold War. It tells a story of what made Ronald Reagan the man he was, and not so much his politics, but who he was as a person.
I love that the synopsis was that it's from childhood to Oval Office. Is there anything that you learned about the former president while playing his mom?
I learned more about Ronald Reagan playing his mother than I ever knew about him before the project came to my desk. And I think, it was really interesting to me that he came from such humble beginnings. They were very, very poor, to the point that his mother really protected him from it, and he didn't really know how poor they were until he was older. His father was an alcoholic. He was raised in a small town where there was a very tight-knit community. And I think a lot of those pieces of his childhood sort of shaped him and what he grew to become.
In the movie, it really showcases how much his mom was part of his life. What was it like taking on that role for you? And was it hard for you to, source what she was like to become that character when a lot of the attention really wasn't on her?
Yeah, I think for me as an actor, it was important to show the love between mother and son. And I think the love of his life also influenced him with Nancy. So there was sort of this theme of the people that really loved Reagan deeply influenced him in a way that gave him a certain kind of courage to pursue what he pursued. And early on, what Nelle really instilled in him was to put others before yourself. And that kind of love, a different kind of love that wasn't selfish, but was one that gave back. And I think that really inspired and led and guided his leadership.
The translation of seeing his childhood and watching him grow, there was so much of his mom's input in his destiny and him being meant for more. What was it like kind of portraying that, laying that groundwork and then seeing how it became much bigger than his mom, Nelle, probably anticipated?
Yeah, the script, I think, was really great in that it stayed true to certain conversations, even that Reagan had written about in his autobiography. And Nelle had such eloquence, and she was a great speaker. She was a part of the community, a leader in the community. She was a writer. She was a performer. So all those things being exposed, Reagan being exposed to that stuff as a kid, I think also helped to guide his path. And I believe that Nelle believed Reagan was destined for greatness. I don't know that she knew exactly what path that would be, but I think she believed in her heart that he was destined for something great, and it was up to him to rise to the occasion. And she tried to guide him in those steps.
When you're taking on a historical figure like this that we don't really know too much about, how do you dive into the character and find out, the truth of the way that she interacted with him?
Learning about their relationship was, most of my research came from Ronald Reagan's own autobiography, and then other biographers that had written about his upbringing and had written about his parents. So I had to kind of piece together things from a few different books, because there wasn't a lot. There were a few photos, but there was no video of her that I could find. So in terms of mannerisms and things like that, I had to kind of fly by the seat of my pants and hope that my interpretation was as close to who she was as possible. But it was also, like I said before, it was really important for me that the love was a guiding post between the two of them.
I'm sure many people out there are thinking this is a very politically charged film. After all, it is about Reagan and his life. But when I was watching the screener, there was so much nuance to just his development, how he became who he was, and an overall message that was more than just his politics. And then there even was all of the glitz and the glam of the Hollywood stuff where he started. What do you think will surprise people about this film that they might not expect?
I think because he was a president, people anticipate that it's a political film, and it's not. It's because he was a president, of course, there's a political backdrop for it, and the choices that he was making during those times. There's flashbacks to sort of fill in the gaps of what may have been facing him in those moments and what grounded him to make the decisions that he made, or what shaped him to be the kind of leader that he was. And I think that's the sort of surprising part, is all these pieces of his life that led to that moment that became the legacy of his presidency.
Dennis Quaid really nailed it with his embodiment of Ronald Reagan. What was it like being on set with him and seeing him become Reagan?
Well, I think what was really interesting is I because I played Reagan's mother when he's a boy, I didn't have any scenes with Dennis Quaid. We were sort of like ships passing in the night on set, but when I saw the film, I was blown away how he embodied Reagan, and certain angles of his face and the way he was speaking. I mean, I didn't feel like I was watching an actor try to impersonate a real person. I feel like he really embodied Reagan and had such a great representation of who Reagan was. I couldn't be more thrilled for people to see his performance. Because we didn't work together like in scenes together, I didn't get to see as much of his process. But I think what's interesting now, doing press with him without the hair and the makeup and all the things of Reagan, and just seeing Dennis be Dennis, it's really neat, because I'm like, I kind of met Reagan before I met Dennis in some ways, and it's amazing even in those moments to go, wow, you really did transform.
You shared some incredible behind-the-scenes content on social media throughout the process. What was it like being on set with Dennis and John and David and Nina? I mean, there's so many people.
There's such a it's really an amazing cast, and there's moments where I still have to kind of pinch myself that I'm a part of this, and to be considered among such wonderful, amazing actors. I'm just tickled. It's really lovely.
I need to ask you about the OC turning 21. Can you believe it? And when you look back on the show now, because I feel like it's having its own renaissance too.
It's having a resurgence, which is really interesting to me. And I guess because it's like that 20-year, post-show thing. But the book that Rolling Stone did last year, I think, sort of gave it another kick back into the public eye. And who knew it would become such a pop culture classic and something that people would look back on. And it was, sort of ahead of its time in that sense of like the teenage angst show that hadn't really been done up to that point. I mean, My So-Called Life kind of had that going on, but the OC pushed the envelope in another way. And it's trippy. It's really trippy to be a part of it, and like that much time has passed by. It's kind of weird.
Is there anything from the OC that, like a memory from set that stands out to you?
Working with Peter Gallagher and Tate Donovan, I was such huge fans of both of them, and then being there, it was also a very surreal moment. But the one thing that always sort of has stood out to me and has stuck with me most of my career is Peter, because this was the OC was like my first kind of break, and he would tell all of us it's lightning in a bottle, and this is like once in a lifetime kind of an opportunity, and they don't come around very often, so appreciate it and enjoy it. And I'm so glad that I had somebody like him to tell me that. As I was 19 doing that show. I was young and coming into the business, and it was all very fresh and new, and that's a piece of advice that I've always carried with me, and it was really amazing to work with such seasoned actors as my first gig.
Another show that had like a major resurgence because it was on a streaming platform was Suits, and around that same time was The Mentalist.
Yes.
The Suits is now getting a rebrand and a relaunch. Do you think The Mentalist would ever have that kind of resurgence? Because I see it's on the streaming platforms now too.
I guess it is on the streaming platforms. I didn't think about it in that regard, but I mean, yeah, that would be cool.
Why not?
I mean, I don't know, because it's a very different type of show than the OC.
That's true.
And Suits, really. But I think, if the audience is there for it, you know, if the producers want to entertain it, it sort of becomes a why not.
Yeah, why not? Final question. This is coming from my executive producer because she was a huge fan of Reunion.
Of Reunion, oh my goodness. Oh, there's so few of them.
She was like, her one thing she wants to know was about the reunion.
Right, she probably wants to know who the killer was.
She was like, who is the killer? Because they never revealed it.
They never revealed it. And it's like, I get this question all the time, like, who was the killer at the end of Reunion? I'm not entirely certain that the writers knew, but there was a rumor that it was supposed to be the illegitimate child between Sam and Craig, I think, was the character's name. Wow, I'm really pulling this one out from the depths. I think that was his name, but it was Sean Ferris's character and Alexa Davalos. They were, you know, she had the baby and gave it up for adoption and all that stuff. So it was like the baby grew up and came back for revenge. I don't know.